of the sort conditions video here. As you're observing, you probably noticed I got some of these numbering and lettering wrong. It's a little bit hard to do while narrating, but these are correct now. There are 12 conditions with the right letters starting the components by the right numbers. I had my H's duplicated here accidentally. So now what I want to do is reference sort of what this code is doing on the server side. So whenever you see these JSON codes here, these are usually ones that are actually referencing how your HTML code, your JavaScript inside of here ends up interacting with the elements of the JSON server. So the first one that I said that I referenced here was these initiate batch conditions. And to figure out what that means, we need to go into the actual batch itself. So anytime someone goes through here, a participant that is as what JSON calls a worker, they are actually running inside of a batch. So this is where everything is managed from. If I created a new batch, let's say pilot study would be a good one if we're sort of just testing this out to see if it works. That new batch goes here, and you can change the worker types. For most experiments, I have everyone either a general single worker link or potentially a general multiple worker link. Where the data is for this specific batch, all the results just sort of get collated by batch, right? There's this other little variable here called batch session data. So you can see that this session data is completely empty. And that's because no one has ever run in this batch before. So this sort conditions code for this specific batch has never executed this initiate batch conditions function going on here. So it hasn't filled up an array of values. Now in the previous video for batch session data, I had it where there was the conditions were 100 for condition A and 100 for condition B. And you can actually see that this is where this information is stored. So this fill array values function over here says for variable I, give me this count, and then push to the array all of these numbers A, basically. So it puts in 100 A's based on my conditions. Now, what I actually want for this study, I'll jump back. So when this study is going to be initiated sort of for the first time, and this is just as an example, I actually want 50 assigned participants per condition. Sorry for clicking fast. Going into my sort conditions component here, going into properties, and I'm going to edit this conditions count. This is the only thing I haven't changed so far. Right now I've been editing the HTML code to make sure my conditions and component numbers line up correctly. Now I'm actually going to go in here, and I'll keep this up so I can track I have the right ones correctly, but I want 50 participants for condition. So when that eventual array is generated, that has all of this information, 3, 4. I want it to be 50 for each of these conditions. So I'm going to go through here. And I did that once more than needed. All right, so that ends here for condition L. So now I have my 12 conditions, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, L, that align here with this code inside my sort conditions block, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, and L. So I'm going to get 50 of these specific letters in this big array inside of batch conditions. I'll hit save here. That is going to essentially fill up that array, and then this randomized selector here, sorry, minimize this. This one down here, this function selects, basically it takes a random index and ends up with a random condition. It selects randomly from that array, and that's where the the condition information comes from. That's how our participant actually gets sorted into this condition. So I'm going to do a small example of that. It may not work too well with the screen recording here, but I'm going to, we'll try it anyway. So from this specific batch, I want to run it in here. We can see the batch session data is empty, and I am going to run through this. So if I run it here, this is going to run in the default batch. So actually what I'll do is I'll just go into my default batch here, and I'm going to edit the batch session data. Now, typically this isn't something you would want to do, but let's say you're overbalanced on conditions, you're not running hundreds of these, but you went through and there's a couple left. This is where you would essentially run. You could sort of make manual changes to how many participants you want in the condition. So other than actually setting up the condition numbers, let's say you've run through this study and there were a high rate of failures in one condition just for sort of a random reason, and you wanted to go back and sort of balance your condition numbers still using random sampling. You could go in here and you could kind of delete a couple of these so you end up with more in condition B. But if I kind of fully erase this data, so I'm getting rid of all that session data here. First of all, it doesn't have anything to do with these results. These results are still going to be randomized to the condition. These are mostly test ones where I didn't actually go through much of the data. But if I were to look through this data, we would see that they were randomized to condition. So I'm going to go back here. The batch session for default is empty. So what that means is that script is going to see that the batch session data is empty. It's going to go in here in conditions count, and it's going to generate that really big array that I need. So I'll just hit run and jump through this. Now I'm in the sort conditions file here. I'm going to be sorted into one of these groups. Right when I hit continue, it runs that function. You don't see anything on the front end, obviously, but now I'm into an experimental condition. If I actually wanted to see what that one was, me as someone who can edit who knows how to go in and edit this code and figure that out, can go in here and look into this, and then I would be able to figure out what it is, just me personally. But if I hit continue here, it's going to jump me into the experiment. Now I'm not actually going to go through this because I don't have my sort of test versions set up for this experiment, which only takes me about 30 seconds to go through. So I'm just going to escape. I'm going to jump back here, and then I'll actually just sort of go back here into my code. So now sort conditions has run once. Nothing in here changes because this is just sort of reference information. But when I go into my worker and batch manager, I go into default. This is the batch I was running in. Batch session data, boom, we see that here for all of these conditions, right? I have 50 A's, 50 B's, and this should end around 600, right? All of my conditions have now been generated that first time it goes through. Now, the next time I run through, or rather a participant would run through this study, it's going to randomly select from this list, which is the same thing it did after generating this condition. So that's how the sort condition HTML code and basically component works, randomizes them somewhere into here, and then from there they jump into demographics and they go to the end page. That's essentially everything for this explanation of the JSON study. So once your HTML code and everything is done, that's pretty much it for setting this up. So the last video is just going to cover exporting this study, uploading it to my server version of JSON, and then linking that into the SONA portal from which we run our experiments at UC.